What is going on, everybody? It's your boy John, and welcome back to Gearbox. So today, just like any vehicle that I've ever owned, we are going to do a maintenance schedule video on the 2024 Ford F-150 Raptor. Now, if you guys have been watching this channel for a week or a year or 5 years or however long it's been, you know that I am just really OCD when it comes to vehicle maintenance, not only just like standard maintenance intervals, but also preventative maintenance. So want to make a video to help you guys out who are maybe new to the Raptor or the 2024 F-150. So without further ado, let's get into it. Now, the first thing that we're going to talk about today is kind of the obvious one, and that's oil changes. Now, by the Ford handbook, they would say that oil changes should be done every 10,000 miles. Of course, these numbers are all going to differ greatly if you're towing or driving the truck hard or whatever, but for your standard day-to-day operation, Ford says 10,000 miles. I do not subscribe to that. I'm the type of guy that I'm every 5,000 miles. I don't mind doing it. As far as I'm concerned, it's increasing longevity of the truck and my investment. And so why not go ahead and spend a couple extra dollars to make sure that your engine is safe day in and day out. Now, once we actually hit the 10,000 mile marker, we'll go ahead and say, do your oil change. But the other two things are going to be a tire rotation, which, as we probably all know, 10,000 miles is pretty much the gold standard for when to do a tire rotation, but do it at 10,000 miles nonetheless. And then number two is go ahead and inspect your brakes. Now, of course, once again, depending on the type of driving you're doing, brake life will, differ a little bit, and they should last you well over 10,000 miles. But what we're looking for here is any uneven wear or maybe warping of brake rotors, just making sure that, of course, with as much power as this truck has, we are also able to stop and not die. And I would say that's important. So that is going to be 10,000 miles. Now, by the law of mathematics, if we're starting at the 10,000 mile interval, the next interval is probably going to be 20,000. And if that was your guess, you are correct. So at 20,000 miles, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to do the oil change, we're going to inspect the brakes, and we're going to rotate our tires. But what we are also going to do is change the cabin air filter. And I feel like this one gets lost in the shuffle way more often than it should. Every single time, not that I've bought like 1,000 cars or anything, but every time I buy a used vehicle, which is pretty much every vehicle I've ever bought, I change the cabin air filter immediately. And it's not because I have like some crazy allergies or anything, but I just think it's funny to see how many people, whether they've put 20,000 miles on their car or 200,000 miles on their car, and have probably never changed the filter. That's disgusting, and you will not believe the difference that a singular cabin air filter will make when you turn on your AC or your heating unit, and just the fresh air coming through there. For one reason or another, I love that one. But anyway, just change it at 20,000 and you can thank me later. Now on to the 30,000 mile interval. So of course, anything done at the 10,000 mile interval will be done at this point in time. We've changed the cabin air filter. We've done all that sort of stuff. What we're also looking for at 30,000 miles is checking engine hoses and belts. Once again, similar to the brakes at 10,000 miles. Not that anything should be going wrong, but just double check them, make sure everything's good and operating as advertised. But number two is going to be the engine air filter or a cold air intake or whatever you have on your truck. This is also one, believe it or not, that gets overlooked all the time. Now, if you are running a stock intake and you don't take the, 0.42 seconds to change the engine air filter, you are just lazy. I would not take it into a dealer to do this. It takes literally 0.2 seconds. You know, if you are running an aftermarket intake, this is a good time to take that intake off, wash it out with the proper, you know, cleaning solution, oil it up, let it dry out, so on and so forth, and make sure that your engine is breathing good, you know, solid air. If you do not clean this filter, you will be starving your engine of air and bad things will happen. So let's not do that at the 30,000 mile marker. Now that we're on to 40,000 miles, we're pretty much rinsing and repeating everything that we just talked about. Oil, brakes, lines, hoses, air filter, cabin filter, all that sort of stuff. Just do it. It's not difficult, just do it. I'd say the vast majority of this stuff, even if you're not mechanically inclined, can be done in the driveway of your home. Like, you don't even need to be in a garage, right? But this is the type of stuff where, you know, at 40,000 miles, should things be going wrong? No, probably not, unless you haven't done your routine maintenance. But it's a good kind of marker in the life of your vehicle to where, you know, it's seen some shit. It's done some miles, whether it's all highway miles, city miles, off-road, whatever. Of course, especially if you're using your Raptor as it's intended to be used in the off-road setting. But 40,000 miles to me is kind of that come to Jesus moment. You know, let's once over everything, make sure everything is good, make sure everything is working, and there's no kind of early signs of deterioration or failure in certain areas. Now, of course, for engine hoses and belts and stuff, if you're not mechanically inclined, sure, take it in, do it. It's not a big deal, but especially if you have to change them, you know, there might be some things that you're just not equipped to do, whether it's mentally or with the tools that you have or whatever. But do this at 40,000 miles and you will be good to go. Now, basically from 40,000 miles all the way up to 100,000 miles outside of your routine oil changes and whatever, you know, this is kind of purgatory, right? There's nothing crazy that needs to be done. Just be up to date with your truck, make sure everything's operating as it should, and you'll be good to go. Now, once we hit 100,000 miles, this is where some of the bigger ticket items start to come into play, and so let's talk about them right now. Number one on this list, per Ford's manual, I guess, is inspect the accessory drive belt. Now, what does this do? No idea, but we're gonna inspect it and make sure that it's good to go. Number two is flush your fluids. This is a big one. Like, let's talk about transmission fluid or diff fluid or whatever. These are things, especially for those of you who might not be mechanically inclined, that get overlooked. You just kind of drive your truck and I guess in some ways take it for granted with how it works. But of course, there's mechanical gearing and stuff all over the truck outside of just the engine. And so we have to take care of that too. No different than putting oil in your engine to make sure that it's lubricated and the cylinders are firing and operating as intended. No difference there. On that note, we are also going to do a coolant flush. In the same vein, no, it's not mechanical by nature, but it's making sure that the heat dissipation from your engine, especially for those long drives, or maybe those harder drives, is being able to be done efficiently, and you're not cooking your engine and putting yourself in harm's way, for lack of a better term. This is all very important stuff. What you'll also be doing at this point in time is replacing spark plugs. Now, this is definitely something where if you don't know what you're doing, I would definitely get in touch with either a dealership or your local mechanic that works on your vehicle or vehicles. It's not that it's necessarily hard, but especially if you're not buying pre-spaced spark plugs, that's maybe going to be biting off a little more that you can chew. But either way, just making sure that that engine is living, breathing as it should, Obviously, the spark plugs are what ignite the fuel going into the cylinders from the fuel injection. So want to make sure that that's good. So that way you're not driving a 4-cylinder truck when it really should be a 6-cylinder truck. What we're also going to be doing here, and I know that this 100,000 mile marker is a lot, but obviously that's a lot of miles. So there's a lot to look over. But what we're also going to do is just check the undercarriage of the truck. Whether it's drive shaft, joints, bushings, whatever, you know, there's a lot of stuff under this truck, especially from the suspension components, that allow it to do what it's designed to do. And if those bushings or, you know, joints fail in any way, shape, or form, it's going to be a bad day for you. So just look it over, make sure that if something seems out of place or wrong, that it's addressed and not just kind of swept under the rug and you say, oh, I'll worry about that later. Don't do that. Look at the undercarriage. It's kind of a broad term as far as Ford is concerned, but needless to say, I think if something is actually wrong in this case while you're looking there, it'll be pretty apparent pretty quick. And finally, we get to the last portion of the Ford Owner's Maintenance Guide, and that is the 150,000 mile marker. Of course, we still have all the other stuff that we're talking about, but this one in particular is pretty important. Number 1 is going to be a transmission fluid flush. Now, me personally, I would probably opt to do this earlier, but it's still, you know, this is by Ford's recommendation, so I'm going to assume they probably know a little bit more about this truck than I do, but either way, I digress. We're going to do a transmission fluid flush. Number 2 in this case, similar to the transmission, is going to be a transfer case fluid flush. Try saying that 3 times in a row. I've done this take 1,000 times at this point because of that, so I don't know, I guess maybe pity me. But either way, we're doing some major kind of niche fluid changes at this point. But once again, similar to, I think it was the 100,000 mile conversation, there's a lot more mechanical parts in a truck than just the engine or even the transmission for that matter. So make sure that that's all being properly lubricated and just going to add to that longevity. So guys, I hope that's helpful. If you guys have any specific questions on specific maintenance items on this truck, please drop them in the comment section down below. I know this was more of a generic type of maintenance guide, but there's definitely a lot more specific stuff that can be addressed. So if you have questions, drop them in the comment section down below. If you like this video, if you found this helpful, please give it a big fat thumbs up. And as always, guys, hit subscribe, hit the notification bell. You know the drill. Until next time, peace.